Hello, everyone. Welcome to the October edition of the Professor Messer Network Plus Study Group. This is the monthly study group where we make sure that we have your questions, we can answer your questions. I accumulate all of the information you're sending me throughout the month, and we try to go through as much as we possibly can in an hour once a month. If you are watching this live on YouTube, which is our YouTube streaming provider for this month, then I will recommend that you go to the Professor Messer website so I can see you in the chat. There's a chat box at the bottom of the Professor Messer website. That's the chat box that I am looking at that has the Live Network Plus study group. If you're on YouTube Live, there's also a chat on YouTube Live, but I don't see that in real time. So just something to keep in mind as you are using that, something to always consider. I want to be sure that I have the ability to see you when you're asking questions, and I get great questions from you in the chat room, so it's a great place to be. We do this study group every month, and it's something that I could only do with your help. This is also something that a lot of the people who purchased my offline version of my of all of my study materials, they also help produce this particular study group. If you'd like to know how to get all of my videos, that normally you can watch all of my videos, every minute of every video is available to watch absolutely free on ProfessorMesser.com. But if you'd like a version that takes you off of the internet, you're in a car, you're in a plane, and you'd like to just have it local on your machine, you can find information about that at ProfessorMesser.com/download-network plus. And of course, you can always follow us on Twitter and YouTube and all those great places. I make it easy to find me. You go to ProfessorMesser.com/something/YouTube/Facebook/Google Plus. Just try a bunch of slash things. You'll find me in there somewhere. There is also a lot of information that we do every month. So if you want to go back and see the topics that we have previously discussed, I have all of the replays available on the Professor Messer website. They are at the bottom of the list of videos for the particular study group that we usually do. So for Network Plus, they're at the bottom of the Network Plus video group. So you can go to there and see last month's study group where we talked about how IPv6 differs than IPv4. We talked about the difference between a MAC address and an IP address and why those are different on our networks. We talked about how troubleshooting and using network tools and the differences between some of those tools and how we would use those in the real world. We talked about what a VLAN is, and we talked about, now that your A+ is completed, should we really just jump right into Network Plus? Are we ready just to take the Network Plus without any other studies? That's a great way to do it. So you can always go there and find out more information about what we studied last month or the month before. There's an enormous amount of resources available to you. We go through all of those things all the time. I've also got on the Professor Messer website a call-in line. So if you would like to call in, you can see the phone numbers that are at the bottom. I've also got a toll-free number. If you are not in the United States, you can use Skype. Or if you don't have any minutes on your phone you want to use, you can use Skype at 855-235-4742. Now, before we get going, I like to ask you questions during the study group. We have some pop quizzes that I like to put up, and I've got some good ones this month that I've worked on that really blend in with content. So to get you familiar with how we use that, I have a question for you. And the question is, how long have you been studying for your Network Plus certification? You can vote at the VoTRS. You use numbers 972984, or if you have one of those great little QR code readers on your mobile device, you can point your camera right here at the screen and it will take you right to that voting screen. So if you've ever wondered, what in the world can I do with this QR code reader? Now you have a good reason for that. This is also something, as I mentioned, we do every month. So we generally will get different responses to these things. And in the chat room, some folks are saying, is this different every month? Absolutely. I get different questions from you every month. And so we try to go through different ones all the time. This is also, if you're dialing in, if you're calling in via those numbers that I have there just underneath the video display, you may want to listen in to the call because there is a delay between what you will hear live and what you hear on the stream. So something you need to think about. So let's go out to VOT.RS and you can start doing your going through and answering those questions. And what I see on my side is this. I get to interactively see as you are voting what the answers are. Now, this is just something informational. You can't get this one wrong. You know how long you've been studying. Later on in the study group, I have questions for you where you have to think about these Network Plus topics, and we will just talk about and describe exactly what you need to know with that. So I usually get quite a mix with this particular question. There's generally a number of people who are just getting into studying. They want to get on the study group and learn more about it. And then there's others like me that I'll start studying for certification, and then I'll have to stop, and then something happens. I've got a project going on, or something happens at home that I need to work on, and I put it down for a while. Then I have to come back to it, and then I'll finally get that certification done. So not unusual for those types of things to take more than a year to finally get that done. And indeed, on this particular study group, we do have that mix. We have people that have been doing this for about 1 to 3 or 3 to 6 months. And then we've got others that have really been studying for Network Plus and trying to get those Network Plus pieces in place. That's one of the things that I generally see on the study group. And we're glad to have you here. And as we go through this study group, I have topics on here that should bring everyone along, whether you're just starting with your certification studies or if it's something that you've been doing for quite some time. I will also mention that the current Network Plus certification is one that is the N10005. One of the questions that I will sometimes get is this a new certification version? The A plus certification, for instance, from CompTIA was just renewed. There was a new version that was just released. The old one has just been retired. So did the same thing happen to Network Plus? No, it did not. You can see that the Network Plus has been around since December the 1st of 2011. And a lot of people are asking, is this going to be updated? Is there a new one coming? CompTIA at this point has not announced one, at least not to my knowledge. I don't have any special knowledge of CompTIA. I'm not a CompTIA partner. I don't talk to them. I don't know anything about them. They're not obligated to tell me what's going on. So I also rely on you. If you see that CompTIA has released a new version or they've changed something within the existing question, send me a note. There's a contact us link at the top of the Professor Messer website. It'd be really great to find out as soon as I can so I can tell everyone else. There is obviously about 3 years. If you've been watching CompTIA, 3 years is usually what it takes for them to come out with a new version of a particular certification. And if this is December 2011, then we can probably think that we've got about another year until everything is transitioned over. So maybe in the next 3, 6, 9 months, we may see a new version released, and there's usually an overlap where you can take both of them. There is, in this particular newest version, additional questions about virtual networking, about the OSI model, about security, and you can usually go out to the CompTIA website, and we'll show you later on in the study group how to find out what the latest version is and what you will be asked about on that exam. So quite a bit that you could always go through and learn about with those pieces. Well, let's jump into some of the questions that you sent me this month. There was a lot of questions that came in this month, and I've tried to parse them out. Of the hundreds and hundreds of questions that I get, I can group certain questions together. Some of them are duplicates, or at least talk about the same subject. Some of you in the view that we have, or the list, the registration process, have sent me questions about things that you want to know about. So I've been working hard to make sure that I can get the questions all put together. And so the first one is, we're going to start off the month with this month's acronym. So I have a question for you. Do not answer this in the chat room. If you are in the chat room and live, do not answer this particular question. And the question is, what's commonly used to prevent loops in a switched environment? Be good to know. And you have some options available. This is your question of the month, to be able to understand what you'd like to find. And the answers you have are STP, RIP, OSPF, BGP. STP, RIP, OSPF, and BGP. If you go to 9686, usually there's more numbers there, but that's actually correct. Go to VoTRS number 9686, or you can click the QR code reader right here on the screen. It will take you to that particular question. This is your number of the month. You're trying to figure out what that might be. And if we flip over, take you to that screen, there we go. Go to VOT.RS. I'll even pop up that QR code so you can see. And you can see at the bottom, the responses are STP, RIP, OSPF, and BGP. So this is one of those things that if you're looking for an acronym, and the Network Plus certification is full of acronyms. There are a ton of acronyms on this certification, probably much more than A+. Now that I'm thinking about it, there's all the protocols. There are the encryption types. There are tunneling mechanisms. There is questions about even more protocols and port numbers. A lot of acronyms to have to figure out associated with that. So our question this month is about loops in a switched environment. This is obviously something, if you are concerned about how your environment's going to work, this is always a challenge to figure out, how can I prevent my network from going down? Because if traffic is looping around the network, there's a concern. But there's differences whether you're looping around a switched environment and looping around a routed environment. So this question asks specifically about a switched environment. And that's your key when you're reading through this, is about those pieces. And quite honestly, I didn't even give you the option down here for what a routed environment would prevent. That would probably be a good answer. Let's show the results on the screen, and you can see I didn't fool very many people with that one. 24 of you said, yeah, that's STP. We got that. The others are RIP, OSPF, and BGP, which are routing protocols, which can certainly be configured to loop, but those are in a routing environment. We're specifically talking about a switched environment. And when we talk about switching and preventing loops, we're talking about something called STP, which stands for Spanning Tree Protocol. That's another important thing that you have to know for your exam. Sometimes the exam's going to ask you about STP. You have to know what that is. STP? I should probably memorize what STP stands for. It's probably one of the challenges that we run into when working in these environments is we're always trying to add more acronyms into the list. So when you work with them every day, it becomes almost second nature. When you're trying to learn this stuff for the first time, it seems almost overwhelming. So it might be very useful to have some flashcards to help you with that. Now, the reason I asked the question is because I got a question about it. Can you explain how Spanning Tree Protocol works? This was not the only person. Rhonda asked this one, but not the only person who asked about the Spanning Tree Protocol. A lot of people asked about Spanning Tree. This was the month for Spanning Tree Protocol. I haven't talked about it in a while on a study group, so this would be a good place to start.
Seconds.
I'm not sure why the nice lady is talking to me. Let's turn her down just a little bit and see if we can get that. Oh, she tells me that my phone is going to turn off in a few minutes, and we'll have to turn that back on in just a moment. We'll get that extended and make it go further for you guys so you can call back in a bit. The Spanning Tree Protocol is one that we use when specifically talking about switches. And this is the challenge, is there's no mechanism with switching. When you put a packet into a switch, that packet goes exactly through the switch and wherever it needs to go. The switch doesn't drop it for any particular reason if it sees it looping around. And there's no mechanism in a packet that's going through that switch, in a frame that's going through that switch, that really has any method of dropping it, which means if you took a switch and you took a cable and you plugged one cable into one port on a switch and you plugged the other cable into the other port on a switch, and there was no spanning tree, that frame would just loop around and loop around and loop around and loop around and loop. It would just keep looping. It would loop, loop, loop. These broadcasts that go through would loop because the broadcast goes in one port and it goes into port and says, I need to go out every other port. It goes out every other port and comes back in again and goes out every other port and goes back in again. If you'd like to bring down an enterprise network, simply turn off spanning tree and plug two ports right into each other. You will bring down that network. So obviously that's a concern. That's why spanning tree was created. That's why we have that mechanism that we can turn on the switches that says, let's use spanning tree to prevent these types of loops on a network. Now, whenever you loop something like that, usually when you plug in and the entire network goes down, you know just what just happened. So you can undo whatever change just occurred. Let's look in our logs. Let's see who's in the closet. Tell them to undo what they just did. This is also called IEEE version 802.1d. This is a standard with the IEEE. Roddy Perlman wrote the original version of Spanning Tree Protocol, and we use it almost everywhere. There have been updated versions of Spanning Tree, something like the Spanning Tree Protocol, Rapid Spanning Tree Protocol is a newer version of that, and again, an IEEE version of that, 802.1w. And there's backwards compatibilities with these things so that you can still have your older equipment on the network at the same time. Yeah, so in the chat room, folks are saying, yeah, I've done that before. I brought down my network by looping it, and I brought down networks by looping it. Don't do like me. There was no spanning tree configured on that network. They didn't turn it on. wasn't paying any attention, plugged a couple ports in. There's cables everywhere. It's easy to do. So you don't want to be in that particular situation where you are now in having big problems in being able to do that. Now, I think when you start looking at the layout for spanning tree and for the things you need to know for your Network Plus certification, you're going to have to focus on other aspects of it. So let's look at an enterprise network. This is actually not too uncommon to see with networks that are put a few switches on the network, you connect them all together, and you've got things like this available. So here's a spanning tree network. Now, let's say that this one says on the screen that it is the root, but let's just pretend that we plugged all these networks in for the very first time. I have a bridge here. It's a switch and a bridge. From a networking perspective is exactly the same thing. So you're connecting switches to each other. You can kind of forget that there's other devices connected into that same network. Let's pretend that they're just all connected directly to each other. And you can see we've got switches that interconnect to each other that could create a loop. We could come down and create a loop between these three. We could create a loop if everything went down to these other switches and went back up again. There's plenty of places to loop information around. So if we turned on all of these switches for the very first time, we've configured them for spanning tree. The first thing they're going to do is they're going to effectively elect one person to be the root bridge, the root switch in this network. And the root switch, each one of these devices has a spanning tree configuration where you can specify the lowest switch ID, and that's the one that becomes the root. So generally, the administrator of the network has already planned this out, and they say, I want that switch right there to be the root switch. So I'm going to set configurations of the bridge ID inside of that device to be the root. And if everybody's bridge ID is exactly the same, it uses whatever switch has the lowest MAC address number associated with it. So when these things are all plugged in, before they send any traffic, before they can loop anything around the network, they stop all traffic. Hold on a second. We just got here on the network and we're trying to figure out spanning tree. Let me talk to all of the other switches that are out there. So they send these messages out called Bridge Protocol Data Units, BPDUs. And all the switches talk to each other and they say, hi, here's my switch ID, here's my bridge ID. Is it higher or lower than yours? Oh, it's higher? Okay, well, you can be the king. You can be the root. All of them talk to each other and figure out, okay, we have figured out on this network who the root is. And we're going to go through what's called convergence. We're going to now figure out if he's the root, then all traffic communicates up to the root through what we call a designated port on that root device. All the other devices say, I know how to get back to the root. So I'm going to configure one port, or generally can be more than one, but it's usually just one single port that's configured as the root port. That's the one that switch uses to talk back to the root. So you can see all of the other switches on here have one port that they've figured out talk back to the root device. They also are trying to learn about what else might be on their networks, and they figure out if I'm talking to the root on this side, then I need to talk to my users on another port. That user port where all the users are is the designated port, as I mentioned up here on the root. And then if there is the potential for a loop, they'll turn off a port, and they call that the blocked port. You can see the BP, the blocked port that's on there. Now, if you look at this screen and how it's converged itself, you can see there that now we have gotten rid of all the loops. We can go through here. We can't loop that way. We've got to go back down here. We can't loop this way. So there's no loops that we can create there. It's a straight shot. Let's go down the other way. We can come down here and come through this view, but we can't get anywhere there. We can't loop that. We can come through this view. Nope, can't loop there. We have a network that automatically figured out where all of the switches are, and it made sure there are no loops. That's the beauty of spanning tree protocol. Now, also the beauty of spanning tree protocol is that it can also set itself up if there's a failure. What if we lose a connection? Somebody pulls a cable, the network link goes down, and we can no longer talk between this switch and this switch. Well, spanning tree protocol is smart enough to reconfigure itself and change it so that you can still communicate across the network, even all the way down to those ports and those connections that used to be blocked. So it reconfigures and reconverges so that everything maintains connectivity. This is a great way to set up redundancy in a switch network. And because you're running spanning tree, you know there won't be loops, but if you lose one connection, the other one now takes over. It's an easy way to get that piece going. So spanning tree protocol, very simple whenever you start configuring it out, telling Spanning Tree to do what it needs to do, all the magic really happens behind the scenes. You just need to lay out your map of where you want the traffic to go and how you would like it to be set up, and then configure what happens, which devices are connected, and how they work if there's a failure. This is questions in the chat room talk about these types of things. And I talked about having the lowest MAC address. It is not the oldest device. It is the number that's on the MAC address, that hexadecimal number of the MAC address. It's the numerically lowest one. And if you go back and look at how MAC addresses are defined, the first 3 bytes of a MAC address are a specific number that's associated with a manufacturer. So when you're looking at those numbers, generally an entire group of manufacturer numbers are those first 3 bytes, and then you got 3 other bytes. So whichever one is lowest across all of those switches is what I'm referring to, numerically lowest, not newest on the network or oldest on the network. It's just trying to figure out, everybody gets a number, pick a number between 1 and 10. Okay, who's the lowest? That kind of thing. It really is that simple. And it doesn't have to be complex to do those things with the network. Now I have another question. So get your QR code readers ready, get your extra browser screen ready. We're going to move away from the spanning tree side of things, and I'm going to ask you a question more about binary and decimal. So these are things that are important to know, especially if you're doing subnetting on your Network Plus certification. Do not answer in the chat room. The question is, what is this binary number in decimal? So now we have to know how to do a binary to decimal conversion. If you go to VoTRS and you go to 376971, you can answer this question of what is this binary number in decimal. And the binary number is 0001010. 0001010. Should probably put another 0 in the front of that. But that's okay. We don't have to. So it would be 8. I like to do these in sections of 8 because that's commonly what you will see. So 0001010. There is also, as we go through, some folks were asking about the STP. We could spend hours talking about spanning tree protocol. We could spend hours talking about the election of the root. We could talk about how to configure the election of the root, which device is best to have as the root. We could talk about the convergence process. We could talk about the details of the broadcasts or the multicasts that these devices use to send information to each other. There are a lot of very interesting pieces to how we work and use STP. In this particular case, the Network Plus doesn't get into any of that. So you don't have to worry so much about spanning tree and the details of the protocol and the specifics. When you get to your next networking certification, especially if you look at a switching specific certification, you will undoubtedly need to know about all of those pieces. But for the Network Plus, we just need to understand spanning tree and how it works and the ideas of convergence and that there is an election of a root and those types of things. So let's go back to this question that we have on what is this binary number in decimal, 001010. Now, hopefully I figured it out. What is that number? Do I even have the right number written up as one of the answers? So that'd be great. If I did one of these, I just gave you completely wrong information. So let me calculate out real quick. I think I know the answer. So let's show the results. I should probably put the answer somewhere on here. It's one of the things when you're talking in the study group, you're sometimes not thinking in the study group. And I didn't fool very many of you. There were 34 people that said, this is the number 10. Now, wait a second. There's 2 10s. There's a 1010. How is that a 10? This doesn't make any sense. And if you know how to do the binary to decimal conversion, you can look at this one and do it in your head. Very simple. So it's not 1010. It's not 100. It's not 42. You would think there's a 1 in the 4 place and a 1 in the 2 place. That's not how binary works at all. So let's go and look at how we would do this. I think it'd be good to know how to make all of these things work. And in fact, it was a question that came in from Paul who said, could you give us a brief note on binary notation? So let's talk about binary math and how that works. It's really very, very simple. What I want you to do is if you have a piece of paper or you can just follow along on the screen, I want you to write this down. So these are the things you need to know. Start on the far right with the number 1 and double it. Well, that's 2. Double that, there's 4. Double that, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128. You've effectively written out the 8 places of binary, or the first 8 places of binary. So you always start on the right side and you can work your way up. And it's easy to calculate because you start with the number 1 and you double it and you just keep doubling it. And after a while, these numbers just become commonplace. But if you're just starting out with trying to figure these things out, just write this down. Very simple. In fact, you can write and all the zeros underneath. We just did a question that had these 1s and 0s, and you would put underneath what those 1s and 0s happen to be. Binary is easy because it's either a 1 or it's either a 0. There's no hexadecimal, there's no letters. How do you get a number out of a letter? That's a completely different study group to figure that out. And usually we look at these in 8 at a time. It doesn't have to be 8 at a time. I worked on a mainframe that was octal, that everything was based on octal ratings. There's other ways to look and calculate based on a nibble, which is 4 bits at a time. We usually call these octets because there's 8 bits that we're looking at. So we need to figure out this conversion chart and how to use it. So let's take the question we just did and let's step through it and how it works. And the question was, in fact, I added another leading 0 to this, but as you're going to find, the leading zeros, those zeros that are in the front of this number mean nothing. They're effectively 0. So what is binary 00001010 in decimal? So if we write this out, 00001010, we can write that on our page. And now put on top of that the conversion chart that we created earlier. Start with 1, double it to 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128. So now we have everything we need to know to calculate this out. Everywhere there is a 1, I want you to bring down the number. Everywhere there's a 0, 0 means 0. So we don't bring down. So if we were to bring down a number in every one of those places, we would bring down the number in the 8 column. There's a 1, so let's bring an 8 down. There's a 2, so let's bring the 2 down. So we now can take all of these numbers and add them together. 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 8 plus 0 plus 2 plus 0 brings us 10 decimal. That's how we were able to make the determination, in fact, very quickly, that it was 10 decimal. I was able to look at that in my head. I built out the conversion chart. I looked at 1010, that's in the 8 space, that's in the 2 space, 8 plus 2, 10. I can count that one. I specifically made it so I could do it in my head. So we got that piece there. So let's do it the other direction. Get your QR code readers ready. We're going to do another one really quick. We're going to shotgun some of these things in here. So don't answer in the chat room, but the question I have for you is, what would decimal 17 be in binary? How would we reverse that process? Go to VoTRS and you can answer 978998. So if you write out your conversion chart, there's only one set of combinations of putting 1s and 0s down that can give you the number 17. So there's my hint for you. How would we go through and create the number 17 in binary? How would I calculate those things out if I have my conversion chart? And you can probably, in your head, figure out, well, if I add these numbers together, they equal 17. That's what I'm looking for. So fill out the list on those, and you'll be able to figure out those pieces. If you go to VoT.RS, you can go to 978998. Did I get the number right? I did. 978998. And you've got your QR code readers ready to take that and take you right to that particular page. And Benny very nicely put that into the chat room so you can also get to it very, very easily there. Very simple. And in the chat room, we've got Adam has a very good tip, which says, if you're dealing with an odd number in binary, the last bit has to be turned on. That's a very good tip. So very, very simple. I have, in fact, in the chat room, they're already talking about, we need to do more subnetting. Ready to do subnetting. In fact, I'm working on a video series just on subnetting. So you can go deep into subnetting. You should be able to calculate a subnet in 15 seconds. Figure out what network you're on, what the broadcast address is, what are all the hosts in that subnet. You need to be able to do that in 15 seconds. In fact, I have a chart. Where's my chart? I think I showed this in the last study group. been doing certifications myself. So I've made my own chart. This is what I use when I sit down in, and I go to take my exams. You can't even see it because of the lighting, but I have a chart that I use. I just write out everything I need before I start my exam. So it's ready to go the instant I start. I don't spend time on the exam trying to figure these things out in real time. I write it all down. An exam is stressful enough. I do not want to go into an exam. I can't think. I can't calculate. Well, I don't have to. It's all on a sheet of paper. I'm even taking my own, in my particular testing center, they have a laminated page, and they gave me this really big marker to use. I said, oh no, I got to write this down. I need a fine marker. They had to go scramble and find one. So I bring my own marker now, a very fine tip erasable marker, the kind you would use on an erasable board. You might want to do that yourself. Sometimes they'll give you pencil or a pen and paper, but they're going much more to the erasable. That way they're giving you everything you need and they can erase it at the end. Okay, let's see what our answer is for this particular question. It was, what is decimal 17 in binary? And I gave you a bunch of binary numbers, and we got some nice penmanship. Very bad penmanship. You'll have to, I would love to scan this in to show it to you. Let's get the answer to this, then I'll go back to those other pieces. Now, we already got a tip in the chat room that at least the first bit had to be turned on. So if we look at the four options that we have here, 0001111, 0001, 0001, 10000010, and 1111. There's a lot of ones and zeros, but you'll notice only two of these have a particular bit that is set at the end. And you guys learned something today. You did very well on this particular example. 44 of you said, oh, 17, it's 0001, 0001. That's a good one. That's a real nice one to have there. So how did we figure that out? How do we go figure out that really was decimal 17? This is going to be really useful to be able to do that. So again, we take our chart. We don't know what the binary is, so we're not going to fill those in. Our ones and zeros aren't there, but we can still use the same conversion chart. And we overlay it in the top, and then we count up how many things here add up to 17. You can only count up to 17 with one particular combination. That's one beauty of binary, is you can't have a different combination and have 17. So if we added up certain numbers in here, what would come up with 17? And now that you're looking at the conversion chart, it's probably very simple. We know 16 is close to that, and we need one more. We'll add on the one at the end. Boom, we got 17. And that's why we're able to come up with 0001, 0001, 17. It's that easy. See, this decimal binary stuff, not too hard. We got this stuff. That's easy. That's simple to be able to use those. And that's why when I talk about binary conversions and those types of things, they're simple when you need to do one or two of them. Now, for this binary decimal conversion you see here, it's the fundamentals for being able to understand how subnetting works. So it's going to be really important that you understand how that process begins. Now, as I already mentioned, as you were working on this, I have my chart. I have the things that I use to be able to figure out what those are. It's a cheat sheet where I've already done the calculations and effectively written down every calculation that I need when I go into an exam. That's the part that helps you when you have this foundation of what's there. This is how you're able to know exactly what's happening behind the scenes. So when you go to that chart, you've built the chart, you know exactly how it's going to work. And I think that's where I focus in as well, is trying to make things go as quickly as possible with an understanding of how I got there behind the scenes. If you're in an exam and you're calculating out all of the binary and doing the conversion in real time, you probably won't have enough time to finish the exam. Now, for the CompTIA Network Plus exam, you might have a subnetting question. Subnetting is such a small part of the Network Plus certification. You might not have any subnetting questions. You might have one subnetting question. You might have two. That would be surprising. But people have said, yeah, I got two of them on my exam. Another person said, I got none on my Network Plus exam. And a lot of the questions that I get every month are people saying, I'm really concerned about subnetting. Should I spend a lot of time on this subnetting thing? I'm spending hours and hours and hours and hours. And I recommend, if you're not getting it, go to something else. Go figure out every other part of the exam if you would like to, because I think it's important that you're able to understand subnetting, but it's even more important that you understand everything else. And that you may not even get a subnetting question. That would be hours of your life that you're never getting back that you could have spent studying other topics on the Network Plus certification. So let's now talk about another thing that I find very, very useful for Network Plus, and that is doing hands-on work. And if you're doing anything with hands-on, it's nice to have a screen that you can use to do trace routes, to do packet captures, to be able to do the pings, to understand the netstat command. And sometimes you need to be able to have a big network available so you can try different things. It would be nice to be able to do something like that. But as many of us, especially if we're trying to get this certification for the very first time, we may not have any networking equipment. We may have a cable modem or a DSL modem or router in our house, and we might have wireless, and that's it. But you might want to get deeper into how these specific protocols work and being able to understand how to set up some of these more advanced configurations. And if you want to have an entire lab full of equipment that you can at any point of the day, at any time, sit down and access, you can do that through these Freestyle Live practice labs from my friends at GTS Learning. These are designed to always be available. They're interactive. They're labs that step you through step by step what you need to know. You're obviously doing this on the internet. It's in a remote desktop screen on your browser. So you don't even have to change anything on your computer to make this work. In fact, if you wanted to get an example of how this works, let me show one to you. I'm on the GTS Learning website now. Let's go to my Network Plus course. This is I'm logged in with my credentials just as you would be to be able to run these practice labs. This is the Network Plus practice labs, and I can go through. You zoom up so you can see it, configuring a network adapter, IP address configurations, ARP and packet analysis, DHCP servers and clients, configuring routing, TCP and port scanning. Those sound good. I've even done or started that one before. So if I drill down into TCP and port scanning, I can now go through and use that. It's a network configuration that's set up like this. It has the servers, the gateways, there's a router, there's a web server, and I can go to each one of these devices, and I'm going to turn on my HTML5 view of this. You can have a Java backend, but I don't have Java configured on my device, or if I do, I don't trust it. And then I can go through and power on these devices. They're running out there in the cloud. There's a gateway, here's a router, and here is my web server, my LAMP. So this is a very easy way to have all of that equipment, have the lab ready to go. Because if you go up and look at the actual exercises, and let's go to step 1, the first step is the TCP handshake. Ensure that you've powered on the required devices to find and connect to the server. Open the server manager, select features, click the add features link. It gives you screenshots of what you can expect to see with those pieces. Select the telnet server, click install. You go through the entire exercise of setting up telnet to then telnet to the device, to capture the packets inside of it, to be able to work with all of those pieces. This is one of those things that if you needed to be able to make this happen and you didn't have these resources in your environment, you don't have to worry about it. All the resources are out here. Now, as these devices come up, you'll see they turn from red to green. My gateway's already up, but my gateway doesn't really have anything I can connect to and use. It will have this information. This is the gateway running out here. Looks like a Windows screen to me. We've got other devices running, but I've got this is in a browser screen. This is in Firefox. So I'm in a browser, but this is not a static screen. This is a remote desktop to this server. So I can click on this as if I was running it on a Windows device. Very nice to have that capability. See, there's my start screen. It's an actual Windows machine, and it's already been configured. It's already set up. I don't have to build my own virtual machine that's local. I don't have to have Windows licenses. I simply connect to the server. Here's my server connection. I've already got 2 machines running in my environment, and now I can start doing things with the server. For instance, capture some packets. We'll start up Wireshark. Here's Wireshark starting up. I can have it go out and, let's get an interface I can capture from. There's an interface in my Wireshark that I can use to capture some of the information from, and let's start a capture on this interface right here. And now I'm capturing packets on that network that's out there. I don't know if there's even anything on the connection that I added. I just started clicking a few things. We can go to our client even and now start sending traffic. I can start sending pings. I can start sending information, and you're going to start seeing packets go across the network. There, it's capturing it. I didn't have to do any of this. This isn't in my lab. This is somewhere else on the internet. I don't even care where it is to be able to do that. A great capability that's there. And in fact, they've got a special just for people that watch the Professor Messer study groups for $99. You can access every single one of these labs for your Network Plus certification. And it also goes towards helping what we do here at Professor Messer. If you go to professormesser.com/netlabs, you can also sign up and get a free 1-hour sample. So if you looked at this and I'm not sure if this is for me, I'm not sure this is what I like, you can step through and find out everything that you need to know to be able to work with those. Just to professormesser.com/netlabs, and you'll find everything else along with other pieces. There's more things and more ebooks out there. There are tests, sample tests that you can go through out on that link at professormesser.com/netlabs. Okay, I've got another question for you. Get your QR code readers ready. And remember, no answering in the chat room. The question is, what kind of networking method delivers traffic to a single device? Now, obviously, I have some examples there for you to choose from. I have some options available to you. You don't see them on this screen, but if you go to VoTRS and you go to 421975, you will be able to answer the question of what kind of networking method delivers traffic to a single device. And the options are multicast, unicast, broadcast, anycast, geocast. There's a few options. I got 5 options for you there to figure that out. So if you're sending traffic to one device, what is that one device? How do I do it? Just send one thing there to be able to make that happen. That is one of those questions that often come up, especially when it deals with datagrams going across the network and how we get traffic to each other. And it's an interesting question that came up about this study group and what we use on this study group. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. Okay, let's look at all of these results at 421975. You go to VOT.RS and vote which one would send traffic just to a single device. So I'm looking for the best possible answer for this one. Benny has put the link in the chat room. Thank you, Benny. To be able to do that, we're going to have to put Benny on the payroll. He puts the link in there every time. The idea behind this is to understand what the differences are between all of these. Now, a couple of these aren't even asked about on the CompTIA Network Plus exam requirements, but I put them in here anyway, just to kind of see if you were paying attention to those pieces. So we've got about 32 respondents. Let's see which one of these networking methods would deliver traffic to a single device. And let's see what our results are. Let's show the results. And most of you said, yeah, that's a unicast. In fact, practically all of you said unicast. I guess technically speaking, a broadcast could send it to a single device. Just so happens it sends it to everyone else as well. So that's not the best answer for this particular question. A unicast obviously takes information from one device, sends it directly to another device. A multicast takes information from one device, sends it to multiples. So it's not those three. Anycast and geocast are not in the CompTIA requirements. Anycast is a methodology that sends it to whoever's closest. Talk about a simple mechanism. Hey, you're the ones closest to me. It's that ceiling tile method. Your manager uses the ceiling tile method to hand out tasks and projects. Whoever's desk is closest to them by the number of ceiling tiles is the ones that gets all of the projects. So you want to be sure your desk is farther away than other people. That's my little tip for you. Geocast is geography. You're sending everything to a geography, to a state, to a country, and we're sending it out that way. The question that came in was from Roberta that said, how did the datagrams from your studio reach us during a live study group session? This has come up before, and it may not be exactly the way you think. And then we'll talk about why as we step through these things. So we have 3 that we looked at. We looked at unicast. That was the one where we had one person that was sending information to one other station. And it doesn't go anywhere else. It goes between point A and point B. There might be routers and switches in the middle, but the place where it originates and the place that it ends are very specific. They're 2 named devices. So if you're doing web surfing, you are talking from your machine to a web server and back. That's it. Those are the only 2 devices involved with that particular conversation. Now for streaming media, you can imagine I have... there's 76 people in the study group. Let's see who's on the live stream right now. So if I go to my live stream analytics and we look on the live stream right now, 85 concurrent viewers on here and what they're doing. So we've got 85 people. Now, You can imagine if one device had to send the same information blasted out to 85 different devices. See, I go to the number, it starts dropping immediately. That's a lot of devices to go to have that happen. So unicast doesn't necessarily make sense for streaming media, or does it? Let's talk about that in just a moment. But before we do that, let's talk about broadcasts. Now, broadcast is the complete extreme to unicast. We send out from one device and we blast it out to everybody all at once. You don't even have a choice. I'm sending it out and you're getting it. Your machine has to take that packet in, see the information within it, and be able to do something with it. You don't have a choice. And we talk about broadcast storms. When there's so many broadcasts on the network that it slows down all of the devices, because every device has to bring in that data, has to examine it, and determine if it's something that it can use or not. And many times broadcasts have nothing to do with the end stations. They may be related to the other devices on the network. So that's one of the ways when we talk about ARP updates, we talk about routing updates. There's certain routing protocols that use broadcasts. ARP certainly uses broadcasts to be able to work. Now, of course, there is a middle ground, and that's called multicast, where we can take this one device and say, I only want to send to a subset of everybody who's out there. That subset is not everyone, and it's generally not one device. It's a couple of devices in there. This is very, very useful to use if you're doing streaming, because I can have people essentially register or subscribe to the stream in real time. The protocols go back and forth, says, yeah, I'd like to receive that stream, and it sends that information down to that device. If I don't want to receive the stream anymore, I click a button and say, no more streaming for me, and it takes me out of that multicast. Very nice. We use this also in stock exchanges when the ticker information goes out and people are trying to buy and sell. It blasts those out, and so that those devices can then grab that data and do something with them. Now, this is unfortunately a very specialized set of protocols, and it requires that the infrastructure devices that you have in place are able to use these protocols. So I mentioned here, this is great for multimedia delivery. But this is not how this live stream is working right now. This is not how YouTube works for live streams. This is not how the streaming companies, the CDNs, the content delivery networks, they don't use multicast. Multicast is generally used inside of a single organization where you have control over the infrastructure equipment, and you can confirm that the equipment is able to use this multimedia or this multiple streams as multicast properly. So what are we doing on this live stream if we are not doing multicasts? Are we broadcasting? Are we unicast? Are we using some other method like anycast to be able to do this? Well, we've got a few things going on here. So this is an extremely rudimentary view of what we're doing right now. So in Messer Studios, we have my device that's sitting here. This is really my TriCaster that's sending out the stream. And I have a single link up to a streaming provider. Now, in this particular case, this single link to the streaming provider is YouTube. But I could be using Livestream. I could be using BitGravity. I could be using many other CDNs, content delivery networks out there. I just happen to be using YouTube. And that's an important consideration. Different providers use different protocols which have different methods of doing this. So in our particular case, however, in almost every case on the internet, all of this is going to be unicast traffic. It's not multicast. It's not broadcast. So this is what I'm doing is I'm sending a single stream up to YouTube. And if you're ever watching somebody on a live stream, this is how they're doing it. They're not streaming out to everyone from one place. Those 80-something people here, you're not all connecting directly to me. I'm connecting to YouTube, and I'm sending all of my traffic up to YouTube. And it all goes up there. I send it up to the streaming provider, and I'm just constantly sending. Now, in many cases, this might be TCP traffic where there is SYNAC and acknowledgement sent of the data that I'm sending. In some cases, depending on the protocol method that I'm using, it's UDP, where I'm just sending packets, and if it gets there, it gets there, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. It would make sense for this type of communication that you'd use UDP, but you would be surprised how much TCP is indeed used when we're doing things like streaming video. And it's certainly optimized, but that's a consideration to think about, that Would make more sense for UDP, wouldn't it? Well, it would, except your web browser knows how to do TCP. It does HTTP very, very, very well. And YouTube knows that the best way to get people to view videos is to make it as easy as possible. So a web browser speaks HTTP. All of the firewalls around the world allow HTTP. They allow that web protocol to go through. That's what we're going to use. Yes, multicast would be more efficient, but we don't control the infrastructure devices between us and our users. And UDP would probably be a much better way to do this, but the web browser knows HTTP really well. We'll just use the web browser. That will get the most people using this. So when you connect to my website and you hit the play button, you're actually having that information sent directly from YouTube, and it streams it off to you one packet at a time in a unicast. So you can imagine the infrastructure in place for YouTube to be able to send this information. This is just 80 of us on this live stream. There are many, many, many other live streams happening right now on YouTube where the same thing is happening. And of course, all the other people watching videos on demand are all receiving this all through TCP. Interestingly enough, you're just receiving HTTP data being sent down. Sometimes when you're running Flash in a browser is a separate app. Sometimes it communicates via a protocol that uses UDP. So it really depends on your configuration. If you're on a mobile device, you got your Android, your iOS device, and you're communicating to YouTube, you may be using UDP because of the methods that are used in there. Probably on an Android more than iOS. Haven't even looked at iOS to see what it's using. But I know for the Flash plugins on the mobile devices, they'll use, I think it's RTMP. So it uses UDP to be able to do that. So that's the differences between multicast and broadcast and unicast. And really the only way you know what an application is using is if you go in and you look at the packets themselves. And that's the only way you're going to be able to figure out. And the chat room, in fact, says, yeah, they must have an enormous network. You don't even know the size and scope of these networks, these content delivery providers. It's quite a remarkable configuration to see these things running. And for something like CDN, like streaming video that YouTube and these other streaming providers do, a science unto itself. That's a very interesting niche to do that. And indeed, it's all unicast from YouTube to you, whether you're streaming, whether you are live, whether you're on demand, doesn't matter. It's all unicast. It's not broadcast. It's not multicast. You would think if we could just come up with a multicast way, it'd be much more efficient, and you'd be right. I could just send out one stream from YouTube and whoever wanted to turn to that channel would be able to see it, but it doesn't work that way. Let's now look at the questions you've sent me about the questions. This is questions about the test. And I realize we're getting close to the top of the hour. Probably going to go over a little bit this month. What percentage of the Network Plus questions are performance-based, or does it vary? This question came in from Oliver. And obviously, that's one of the big differences since the beginning of the year, since January, when CompTIA changed their exam format, which used to be all multiple choice. And their exam format now is, a lot of it's still multiple choice, but they've added on something called performance-based questions. Now, these performance-based questions are very different because they make you do something on the screen. Maybe it's matching. Maybe you're taking and matching different devices. They'll show you a list of network speeds, and you have to match in what the topology type is. Maybe they show you a T568A, and they have you put the right colors in place. I don't know. There could be anything. Those are some pretty good examples of performance-based questions. It could also be command line. It could be something like going through and here is a command prompt, and you can't communicate out, so perform a trace route, perform a ping, perform a netstat, and you have to know how to type that in and do it, which is even more important. Now, out on YouTube, and I have a link from this, I should probably put it at the top of all of my connections. If you search for CompTIA exam, I think I'm searching for it, maybe it's candidate experience, CompTIA candidate experience. I'm going to show you this on my screen. So if you go to YouTube and you type in CompTIA candidate experience and you search for that, the first thing that comes up is this 15-minute and 44-second video on the experience. And
thank you for taking time out of your day to watch this short video.
You're very welcome.
CompTIA.
So they take you through not just performance-based questions, but they take you through what you can expect to see when you first walk in the door. Here's the first screen you're going to see. Now, this one shows the A+, but to be fair, it will do, it's the same whether it's Network Plus or Security Plus or whatever it happens to be. It takes you through beginning the exam. The candidate agreement even shows you got 30 minutes to kind of get through the candidate agreement piece. I'm going to skip ahead here at the bottom. So they give you an example of what a multiple choice question might look like. I think we're kind of used to what those would look like. Then they'll step through other things like performance-based questions. And they give you an example of this and run you through the performance-based question right here. So here's an example of what you have to do to be able to find what you're looking for. I'm going to scroll up a little bit further. Here's another example of one. Here's a network, and they're asking questions about the network, and there's a diagram, and you have to choose the correct answer. Or maybe it's something where you are simply filling in or putting things in a particular order. And then once you have those, you can review, and it goes through the entire thing. That's a nice thing to have available. So if you go out to YouTube, search for CompTIA Candidate Experience, it may not be as bad as you think it is. So just something to consider when you're working with those. Now, the number that's on there is a completely different question. And the people that have reported back about what they have seen that, well, it's all over the place. They get different smatterings. Some people might get 2 questions. Some people might get 8 questions. No, I think it was 6. It wasn't 8. 8 would be quite a few, but one person got 5 or 6 questions. They got a lot. Thought that's a large number of questions to get on your exam. And on the CompTIA website, they are not as forthcoming with the total number you'll see. They tell you that you will get a maximum of 100 questions. All right, that doesn't tell me exactly how many that's going to be. It says this will be a combination of multiple choice and performance-based. And you got 90 minutes, and you will get a pass if you get at least 720 points on a scale of 100 to 900. And what we generally expect, that's obviously not a percentage, what we generally believe with these exams is that each question is worth a different number of points. Therefore, it has to all add up. And at the end of the exam, you have to get at least 720 points. So you don't know how many you can miss effectively. You just have to get as many as you can right. And it doesn't hurt to guess on these multiple choices. It doesn't count against you. You'll also notice there's 2 exam codes, N10005. If you are in what's called a CompTIA Academy partner, this is a partner that's an educational institution of CompTIA, you may see this called the JK0019, exactly the same exam. No differences at all between either of those. So something to keep in mind with those. Important to know before you walk in the room what you can expect, and that's a good place to go. That was on the CompTIA website. Along those same lines, someone asks, holy moly, there are a bazillion port numbers. Okay, there's not a bazillion, but there's a lot. Which ones do I have to know for the exam? Because if you go out to some of these websites, there are thousands of well-known port numbers, but you don't have to know all 1,000 of those well-known port numbers. In fact, let's look back at the CompTIA website. And I like that they've added this. On the CompTIA website, I'm at CompTIA.org. I have gone to the Get Certified and chosen the Network Plus option, and it takes me to this. And right here at the very top, it says View Exam Objectives. That's what I'm going to choose. And it then wants you to put in your name. My name is James. I can be found at this mail address. And it already fills in for me the Network Plus. And you could, of course, choose any of the others as well. And I'm going to get the exam objectives. And what it will bring up for me for these exam objectives is I want to know exactly what's expected for me on my exam. And I guess I have to choose my country. There we go. And this is a great place to go. CompTIA tells you everything you will need to know for the exam objectives. They go through every single piece. So they brought up for me both the N10004 and the 005. So you can go back and see what was on the previous version. I want the 005 version. And the exam objectives really go through quite a bit. They tell you all the different domains you need to know and what percentage of those domains you need to have knowledge of. And then they step through everything, all the networking concepts. They talk about routing and switching. Here's all the routing and switching protocols I need to know. What routing metrics are, especially hop counts, MTU, bandwidth, cost, and latency. I need to know the differences between IGP and EGP. I need to know what convergence is. We talked a little bit about convergence today. And here is, identify common TCP and UDP default ports. So if you want to know what exactly the ports I need to know for my exam, there they are. They've written them down for you. Now, to be fair, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Not a huge number there. And they're the most popular ports that you'll run into. But if you scroll all the way back up to the top and you look, it says, the bulleted lists below each objective are not exhaustive lists. Do not listen to this man that tells you that they are. Even though they are not included in this document, other examples of technologies, processes, or tasks pertaining to each objective may also be included on the exam. And that's their out. Yes, they may actually indeed be included on the exam, but what we have found, what reports have shown, is that they stay very, very close to this list of port numbers, but that's their out to say, but we could add another one if we wanted to. But I think if you're studying, if you focus on every single thing that's in this particular list and you don't go anywhere outside this scope, you're going to pass your exam. If you know everything that's here, you're fine. Don't worry about other things they might fit there. And to be fair, CompTIA occasionally will put in their exam questions that they're planning for the next version of exam of topics that are not in this list, and the questions don't actually count. And they'll tell you that when you start the exam. In the candidate agreement, they tell you, here's the things that we're going to do in this. We may give you questions about how networking works in Windows 8. That's not part of the exam, but they might ask you just to see what your answer is going to be. So it's one of those things, as Robert says in the chat room, that's lawyer speak. That's those lawyers talking. I think it's certainly giving them an out and making sure that things could change. You may walk in and things might be different, and that's what that's about. So that's why when we have to figure out what do I need to know for the exam, that's what you need to know is that list. Go to those exam objectives. You're going to be just fine. So another question that came in from Chandra is, which certification needs to be done first? The A+, the Network Plus, or the Security Plus? There's quite a few options there. If somebody's planning to go through all of these, CompTIA says you should do these in this order. They say you should start with A+, you should go to Network Plus, you should then go to Security Plus. They say that's the right three. That's the right group if you're going to be doing this. That's the process. And they've kind of built the exam objectives so that A+ gives you a little bit of networking and a little bit of security. Network Plus gives you obviously a lot of networking and a little bit of security. Security Plus gives you a lot of security and a little bit of networking. But these exams stand alone. They stand on their own. So you could take the Security Plus and just study the topics from Security Plus and you'll be fine. Now, to know these details of security, it's really useful if you know networking. So that's why CompTIA says you could just follow our path, A+, Network Plus, Security Plus. Now, I will tell you, I did Security Plus first, then Network Plus, then A+. I did it backwards. But in my career where I was in a security role, and they asked me to get my Security Plus. And I thought, well, if I've got Security Plus, I'll grab the Network Plus too. And when I decided to do a course on A+, I thought, would be nice if I had my A+, so let me go do that as well. So that's the combination that some people will go through. Some people go straight to Network Plus, that's all they want, and then they jump to something else. They go outside CompTIA completely. Some organizations, especially the United States government, wants a lot of the people in their help desks and other places to have their Security Plus, which I think is great. I think if you're gonna be in an environment where security is so important, you should probably have a security certification. And of course, they don't stop there, but that's the minimum that you have to know to be able to do that. So Chandra is absolutely right in thinking about that. And the answer is that it just depends on where you are in your career and what you want to be able to do after this. Because I would hope once you got your A+ and or Network Plus and or Security Plus, you're going to do something else. You're going to do something with networking. You're going to do something with security. You may work on databases. You may work in a data center. You need to figure out what that's going to be. And I think if you take 2 or 3 of these, you'll probably have in your mind that I really like working with operating systems. Maybe I'll get some Microsoft expertise. I really like working with networking or security. Maybe I'll get a switch or router certification or a firewall certification. That's what I want to do. that's a great way to think about it. It's not just what comes first, it's really what comes next. Well, that brings us to the end of another Professor Messer study group. You can, of course, follow everything we do at professormesser.com/YouTube/Twitter/Google+/Facebook. I even have a wiki on my website. You're welcome to participate. So if you have great notes on Network Plus, you want to put them in the wiki. That's the great part about a wiki, is that you can edit the wiki and contribute to what we have there, be able to do that. I also want to thank GTS Learning. If you want to know more about their live study labs and you'd like to try an hour of it yourself, you can go to professormesser.com/netlabs. And of course, thanks to you. I wouldn't be able to do this study group without all of the great feedback and information I get from you. So it's always important to have that feedback. And thanks for also the folks who joined us live in the chat room, be able to send those pieces, have those things available. I'm able to get instant feedback and see what's going on. So I thank you for that as well. So absolutely be able to keep sending those questions along. We're going to do another one of these next month. So I'll see you then on the Professor Messer Network Plus Study Group.